Hey guys, so in today's video, I want to discuss with you the possibility of a mental illness actually being a spiritual awakening. The reason why I want to have this conversation is because when I was going through my awakening, I was experiencing some symptoms that I actually thought may be leading to schizophrenia. And so I do not consider myself to be schizophrenic, although throughout my lifetime I feel like I have suffered from mental illness. But after my awakening, it's made me question if I was actually experiencing mental illness or was I going through something that was pretty natural but of a spiritual nature. Over 2/3 of the entire world suffers from some sort of mental illness. And so, if it's so common, why does it seem to be so abnormal? So, let me just share with you my own personal experience. If you haven't seen that video, my name is Catherine. I am a spiritual coach, energy healer, and nurse practitioner. If you want to work with me, you can go to my website at catherineglassman.com or you can email me at hello@catherineglassman.com. So my spiritual awakening started in 2018 and it started through meditation. I was meditating for a couple of days, didn't really know what meditation was or how to do it, but I felt like I was doing it right. And about 3 days into it, I heard my name. And it was very loud. It sounded like it was on the outside of my head, but also inside of my head at the same time. It scared me so much that I did not meditate at all for at least a year after that. And then I met a psychic medium who told me that I just needed to protect myself. So I tried it again. And this time I did it when there was a lot of light and it was in the middle of the day. I just figured I'd be more protected that way. And it went fine. But then that night, and then for 2 weeks straight, I started hearing voices right before I'd go to sleep. And it got to the point where I was starting to get very worried about my psychological state. As a nurse, I was working as a nurse in the ER at the time. And, as a nurse is trained, we are trained to look at things from a medical point of view for the most part. And so I was not thinking that it was really spiritual for the most part. I was really concerned that I was developing schizophrenia. And even though there was a deeper part of me that knew that that wasn't the case, it still was the only thing that I could really think of on a logical level. And that's because of the way that I was trained. So in my journey of trying to understand, I started doing research. I started going, I think I went to a church at one point. I went to a Buddhist temple for sure. I started going to therapy. I was just asking different people who I felt like I could trust. And nobody had the answers. It wasn't until I went to a Reiki center and started speaking to psychic mediums and shamans is when I actually started to make sense of what was happening to me. And it all resonated. And so after that, I continued to hear voices, but they weren't of like a disembodied, angry nature. They were very helpful. As a matter of fact, there was a time when I went to Maui and okay, let me back up. So I divide my life into two different phases. Pre-awakening and post-awakening, okay? I was a very different person before I went through my awakening, all right? I was very unconscious. I had an alcohol problem, like it was all bad. So, pre-awakening, I decided to get breast implants, okay? Post-awakening, I still had breast implants and I went to Maui. And vacationing after my spiritual awakening was very different because I was starting to connect with land and connect with like the history of any space that I was in. And it was amazing. And so rather than just going on a vacation just for fun, I would actually go to sacred sites because I could feel it now. So we ended up going to Maui. I went with my partner. And I had already had so many spiritual experiences. It was such a beautiful place, and I felt so connected to the islands. Like the islands actually have a consciousness, and that's when I knew that their mythology actually had some truth to it. So we were in Maui, and we were hiking. And we're just hiking. My partner is like a few feet in front of me. And so I'm kind of by myself a little bit, and I'm just minding my own business. And out of nowhere, I heard, "You need to take your breast implants out." And I stopped for a second and I looked around. I knew that there was nobody there because that's happened before, but it surprised me because I had never heard that before. And so, whatever, I finished the hike. We get back to the hotel and it was bothering me. So I told my partner what happened and he was like, "Okay, we'll just sleep on it because that's a big decision to make." And so for the rest of the time, it just stuck with me. So we get back and I have to go to work. So as a nurse, I was working 3 12s in a row. And every single day, I worked in the ER and I was working in triage each of these days. Every single day, there was a woman around the same age as me who came in with breast implant complaints. Every single one of them had pain. Every single one of them had the exact type of implants and the same placement. And they all thought that there was some sort of leak or there was some sort of serious issue. I even went to the nurse practitioner that was on duty all 3 days and I said, hey, have you ever seen this many people like come in with breast implant complaints? And she was like, no, this is so weird. It's so random. So I told her about my experience in Maui. And I was like, I feel like this might be a sign. And she was like, if this isn't a sign, then I don't know what is. So I took it seriously. Over the next couple of months, I just had my appointments lined up. In like 4 months or so, I had them removed. And when I had them removed, I literally went through a detox for about a week. I had fever, flu-like symptoms. I had chills. I had never felt that way before. Initially, I thought it was because I was coming out of anesthesia, but I have had anesthesia before and I've never experienced that. I did feel a similar detox when I was coming off of birth control. I also asked the surgeon if I could look at the implants, and for whatever reason, they never gave them to me. I didn't bother asking, but I thought that was a little suspicious because I told them that I was a little concerned. I didn't know why, but I wanted them removed, and they never showed them to me. So was there a leak? I really don't know. What I do know is that my body was responding to something that obviously it didn't need to have in there in the first place. So ever since then, whenever I hear a voice telling me to do something, obviously with discernment, because you have to understand that there are energies and entities everywhere, and you have to be in control of which ones you allow in. But from that point on, I knew that I was receiving messages and they were protecting me, as long as you can feel that it is of a higher vibration. Not everybody has the discernment or has the ability to know which ones are good and which ones are bad. But ever since I had them taken out, my body has felt amazing. It was the best decision I ever made. And it wasn't like I was sick or that they were painful. There was really nothing wrong with them before I had them taken out. I just went with that intuition that that was probably the right decision. I followed the signs, and I'm so glad that I did it. So of course, because that story has a happy ending, not a lot of people are going to question my sanity. There are some people that are going to question my sanity, sure. But the fact that I followed through with it and it ended up having a good outcome shows that there might be some validity to it. But then it made me wonder, as I was going back to work and working in the ER and having people come in that were having a psychotic episode or who have been diagnosed with schizophrenia, I started to look at them differently. I really started to wonder, are you seeing and talking to things that aren't there? Or are you really seeing things that are actually there? And why is it that they are having a difficult time managing life while other people are? So I found this article in the Washington Post. It was written by Dick Russell, and he spoke about his son who was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was 17 years old. Throughout his entire life, he was placed on medications and he was hospitalized multiple times. It wasn't until he reached his 30s where they both, him and his son, decided that there had to be another way of approaching his schizophrenia because he developed diabetes, he was developing weight gain, and he just was not happy. So his pediatrician offered to take him to West Africa to speak with some of the local shamans to see how they treat schizophrenia in their culture. When he got there, he met with a famous West African shaman by the name of Malidoma Some. He worked with the family over a couple of weeks, and he actually considered the patient with schizophrenia to be a colleague. In their culture, they consider people to have schizophrenia to actually have a spiritual gift. And by taking a more spiritual approach, the writer's son actually started to see a lot of improvement. Although he still continued to take medications, he reversed the type 2 diabetes, he lost a bunch of weight, he manages to have a job, to exercise, and to even travel solo, which was something that was not possible before. After reading this article, it led me to a lecture that was given by Dr. Joseph Campbell. Campbell is an American writer and a literary professor specializing in mythology. In this lecture, he refers to an article that was written in American Anthropology Journal in 1967. This article was written by Julian Silverman, a chief researcher of the National Institute for Mental Health. Both Campbell and Silverman seemed to find that there was just a cultural difference in how schizophrenia was treated. And because of the cultural difference, there was actually better outcomes with cultures that actually embraced it as a spiritual gift rather than a psychological disorder. In the abstract of this article, Silverman states, in primitive cultures in which such a unique life crisis resolution is tolerated, the abnormal experience is typically beneficial to the individual, cognitively and affectively. He is regarded as one with expanded consciousness. In a culture that does not provide referential guides for comprehending this kind of crisis experience, the individual typically undergoes an intensification of his suffering over and above his original anxieties. This theory is actually backed up by a number of research articles saying that developing countries actually have better outcomes with treating schizophrenia than developed countries, including the United States. So what does that mean with people who are suffering from schizophrenia? After my spiritual awakening, and after intuitively getting downloads through meditation about the subject, what I've come to believe is that those who have schizophrenia truly are connecting with something else. There are multiple dimensions that are happening simultaneously, and they are tapping into these other dimensions. Because it seems that the only difference between a spiritual mystic and a psychotic schizophrenic are the vibrations of the messages themselves. Mystics tend to get positive messages, while schizophrenic tend to get negative messages. Paranoid schizophrenics tend to have command hallucinations, meaning that they will get messages from either visual hallucinations or auditory hallucinations that tell them to do bad things. What I have come to believe now after my awakening is that when this happens, there really are energies and entities that are actually telling them to do these things. And because they are so gifted, they sound so real, and they really think that that's what they're supposed to do. And because our society encourages you to not entertain the delusion, it completely just disengages your conversation with them and the possibility that that might be real. And instead, we are taught to just see them as somebody who has a mental disorder and it be completely dismissed as a real experience. Now, if there are other cultures in the world that see schizophrenics as true shamans, right? And that is such a hardcore disorder when you're on the deeper end of the spectrum. What does that mean for other mental disorders then? What does it mean to have bipolar type 1 or to have borderline personality disorder? Could there be a spiritual component to all of them? Would it be more appropriate to take a spiritual approach to these things rather than being so quick to medicate them? Of course, that's going to be up to the individual, because at the end of the day, the approach doesn't matter, it's the outcome that matters. And if the person that's experiencing it feels happy and they feel fulfilled and they feel content with their life, no matter what approach it is, then it doesn't matter. But if they are feeling stifled and they're feeling like their experience isn't being heard, their experience isn't being respected and honored, then maybe taking a spiritual approach would be more appropriate. Because in my personal opinion, everything is a spiritual problem. And actually, there is a famous quote by Dr. Campbell, and it goes, "Psychotics drown in the same waters that the mystics swim in with delight." So I guess it really just depends on which end of the spectrum that you're on. I'm clearly on the spectrum somewhere, because I still hear voices and I still see things that other people can't see. So am I psychotic or am I a mystic? I guess it's just something to think about the next time you see someone on the streets and they're just talking to themselves. Could it be drugs? Could it be a psychotic break? Or could they actually just be a shaman? So anyway, I'll link those articles if you want to take a look at them below. My name is Catherine. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.